Welcome to Module 2 of Effective Speaking. In the first module, we looked at the process of encoding meaning, and we focused largely on encoding meaning using words, encoding meaning using verbal symbols, and we also looked at how language works and how one can use the right words, how to select the right words, and how words work. In this module, I'll be focusing on encoding meaning, this time by using non-verbal symbols. How do we use a variety of non-verbal symbols to get our meaning across, either by substituting verbal symbols or in conjunction with verbal symbols? However, I prefer to use the word metacommunication instead of using the term non-verbal communication. The reason is that metacommunication is a far more comprehensive term than non-verbal communication. Meta means beyond. So, metacommunication literally means beyond communication. When we communicate, we don't always use a intentional communication. We don't always use a verbal or non-verbal symbols to communicate. Sometimes we can communicate without using either symbol. For instance, when I gave you the example of silence, silence itself worked like a symbol. So, any communication that takes place beyond or in addition to communication is metacommunication. Metacommunication is more comprehensive than non-verbal communication, as it includes unintentional and meta messages. Now, why is it that metacommunication matters? For the simple reason that actions are louder than words. We saw that visual component of a message is 55%, which is largely based on non-verbal communication. So, the reason why metacommunication matters is it's because it's unavoidable. 2, because it may have different meanings for different people. It may be intentional or intentional. Unlike words which are always intentional, metacommunication may be intentional or unintentional, and it may get more attention than words themselves. Metacommunication provides clues about the sender's background and motives, and it's influenced by the circumstances surrounding communication. Very often, metacommunication contradicts the verbal meaning. Say, you tell a friend, suppose you and your friend were both competing for the same job, and your friend landed the job, whereas you were bypassed. Now, since he's your friend or she's your friend, you're compelled to congratulate your friend, but you're happy for your friend, but you're not very happy for yourself. So while you may say congratulations, I'm so happy that you got the job, your real meaning is different because you're not really happy that he or she has got the job. You would have liked to get the job. So, we should look at metacommunication very carefully, because metacommunication is something which we cannot control. What are the functions of metacommunication? The functions of metacommunication are substituting. Many a times we don't use a verbal symbol at all. We use a non-verbal symbol in lieu of a verbal symbol. Think of the multiple ways. Like you want to say go. What are the different ways you can say go? You can use a hand gesture and say go. Along with the hand gesture, you can use the word go. Or you can just wave your hand and say go. You can use your entire arm and say go, or you can just use your head and say go. Or so you can use metacommunication to substitute for verbal communication, or you can use metacommunication, non-verbal communication, to repeat. So as I said, when you say go, you are repeating what you're saying through words with your gesture. Complementing, it can also be complementing, that it's what you're saying verbally, it's complemented by look out there, it's a beautiful day. So I'm pointing in a direction and I'm complementing my verbal message by using my non-verbal message. Accenting. I told you to stop writing. So I'm accenting the particular words which I want to stress by using my fingers. Accentuating. Now accentuating is different from accenting. For instance, say if you've messed up your job and your boss is livid, you say, I want that report today, I can't wait till tomorrow. So banging his fists on the table is accentuating what the boss is telling you through words. Regulating. Regulating is one of the most important functions of nonverbal communication. Now, if you are, when you're on the phone, you are not able to get any visual or audio cues you get, but you don't get any visual cues from your interlocutor. So what do? You're waiting for the person to stop. You don't know whether the person has stopped speaking, and very often you'll find that you're cross speaking. Even before the other person has stopped speaking, you start speaking. Why? Because in face-to-face conversation, we use non-verbal communication to regulate. So if I've stopped speaking, I look at you and say, I'm waiting for you to speak. That means, or I nod to say that I understand what you're saying. Or if I nod many times, that means I can't wait to get my bit in, right? Or when I look up at you, I'm listening, I'm still waiting to complete my sentence. If I've stopped speaking, I look at you. So we use eye communication, we use head nods, we use smiles, we use facial expression to give feedback and also to regulate our conversation. Deceiving, revealing is the most important and most complex function of metacommunication. Now, when we are children, we are very transparent in expressing our real feelings as little children. If we are angry with someone, we have no qualms about saying, I'm angry with you. If we are happy with someone, we have no, if someone makes us happy or we like someone, again, we have no hesitation in expressing our real feelings towards that person. But as we grow older, that's a part of growing up. Say teenagers, you learn to you learn to mask your real feelings. So you have a class teacher, maybe you don't really like the class teacher, but you can't afford to say I don't like you. So you pretend you like the class teacher by smiling in his or her presence, because you know it doesn't pay to say I don't like you. Whereas a small child would very clearly say, I don't like you, I don't like this teacher because she beats me, or because she doesn't smile at me, or whatever reasons. So as you grow up, the process is to conceal your real feelings. Now this works very well because people should not be able to guess what is going on in our mind. That's the work, that's what social interactions are all about. At the same time, in the process of mastering this art of masking or concealing our real feelings, we also lose our capacity to express our emotions. Unlike children whose faces are so expressive, who are so transparent in their communication, adults are not able to express their real feelings because of this process of having to conceal their real feelings, of masking their emotions. So what should one do as an adult? A judicious mix of revealing and concealing is what is called for. There are situations where you are required to conceal your feelings. Suppose you're very angry with a subordinate who has botched up a project. You're very angry, but it doesn't really help to be angry with the subordinate because you'll never get the job done. So without showing your real feelings, you have to make your subordinate do the job. On the other hand, suppose in situations where you're required to reveal your feelings. So suppose somebody has done a very good job and you want to congratulate that person. If you say with a straight face, congratulations, I'm very happy with your success, it's so flat. It doesn't carry any meaning at all. See, in that situation, using using your accentuating with non-verbal communication, either through facial expression, through a smile, or through a gesture, through a pat on the shoulder, all those things count a lot. Therefore, deceiving and revealing is an art which we must learn to perfect as adults instead of losing our capacity to express our feelings. There are different kinds of, let's look at the different kinds of non-verbal communication. So let's split it into the different kinds. The first is the symbols. So symbol is when something stands for something, like the Statue of Liberty, but it has no direct relationship. The object itself has no relationship with what it stands for, like rose standing for beauty. The object doesn't have a direct relationship, whereas in an emblem there is a direct relationship. So say a judge's hammer, or the no smoking sign where you see a cigarette, or you see a skull in danger zones. So that's an emblem because the image or the symbol indicates what it stands for. Illustrators, when you point to a direction, that's an illustrator. Adapters, regulators, as I said, a head nod is a regulator. When you nod your head, you continue your conversation with another person. Affect displays, like a smile is an affect display. Let's look at some non-verbal symbols. Let's look at a complete range of non-verbal symbols. Whenever I discuss this in my class, I ask a group of people to communicate something using a non-verbal symbol. Invariably, people use body language. So suppose I ask people to say go or come, a simple word like that. Invariably, people would use a hand gesture, an arm gesture, a head gesture, an eye gesture, or some part of the body to convey their message. But they don't look beyond body language to look at other forms of non-verbal communication. But we must realize that it's not just body language, but also other things which can convey meaning non-verbally. Say sound. What was the happiest sound when you were in school? The bell ringing. I don't know whether they ring the bell anymore, but we used to, when we were children, we used to have a gong which would indicate that it's lunchtime, and that was, or the class ended. You're sitting in the middle of a very boring class, and the bell rang, and you were so happy, or it was the day when you had to submit your assignment. You hadn't done it, and you were hoping your chance will not come. So sound in a factory, for instance, when a siren goes to show that it's time off. So you can use sound to communicate meaning. Color, as we said, colors themselves can be, there's a whole color science in which certain colors are associated with certain affects. Certain colors produce certain moods. Say light, soothing, there are colors which are soothing, there are colors which are red is supposed to be a color which creates energy, brilliance. Yellow is a similar color, but blue is very soothing. So colors have their association, and you would see how colors are used in communication. For instance, in a traffic signal, we use color, a red light, a green light, and an orange light. So we combine light and color in a traffic signal. But color can be used in isolation. So suppose in India you see a woman dressed in red. Usually red is the color of the bride. So you can guess if it's a group of women in a wedding, you know the one who's wearing red or a shade of red is the bride, and whereas those who are wearing other colors are her friends or other family members. So red colors can be indicators of what you are. They can be means of communication. Touch. Touch can also be a means of communication. Think of occasions where you're at a loss for words, but touch says it all. You want to tell a friend that you care, or somebody's lost someone and you just press their hand. That means a lot. Smell. We don't think of smell as a communicator, but smell also works as a non-verbal symbol. Think of the hundreds and thousands of rupees people spend these days. Not even males tend to spend a lot of money how much money you would spend on your deo and your perfume, because the smell is a communicator about the kind of person you are. So you're very careful about whether you want to project a sportsy image, or you want to communicate a metrosexual image if you're a male, or if you're a woman, you are a wild child, or you are a sophisticate, or you are a city girl. Whatever you are, each perfume indicates your personality or the kind of person you are. Even in places like an ambience of a restaurant is created through the kind of smell around you. The moment you enter a hospital, you know you are in a hospital because you have disinfectants around you. So smell, territoriality, spatial zones and spatial distance come together. We talk about territoriality to explain that we go back to a very old time in history where people need to protect their territory. We are talking about a situation where everyone is onto himself and trying to protect their own turf or their territory. So because of this territoriality, we have the notion of spatial zones and spatial distance. How does this work? We have do you have an idea of what is a spatial zone? A spatial zone means that how far or spatial distance goes together with it. When you're talking to someone or listening to someone, how far do you stand or sit from that person? Now, mind you, all these rules related to any aspect of communication are culturally coded. So what may be right in one culture may not be right in another culture. Unfortunately, in the professional space, in the workplace, we tend to follow the rules which have been devised by the Euro-American world. And in the Euro-American situation, how far do you stand from a person? Normally, when you're talking to a stranger, suppose you're talking to your postman or your plumber or the friendly neighborhood grocer, normally we keep a distance of about 4 feet from the person, tradespersons, somebody who's a stranger you don't know. So normal distance is 4 feet. And suppose you know a person and you meet, suppose you know a person, but not your relationship with that person is still professional, you are supposed to keep any distance between 2 to 4 feet. Now, when you cross that spatial zone, when you stand or sit with somebody less than 2 feet away, you are invading their space, you're crossing that spatial distance and invading their private zone. So we have a impersonal zone, we have a social zone, and we have an intimate zone. We have 3 zones for each of us. The business zone or professional zone, the social zone, and the intimate zone. So when you are standing, suppose when you are at your workplace, you may stand, you may interact with your colleague at a distance of about 2 feet. But when you meet the same colleague at a party, right, you're backslapping and you're having fun, at that time you might cross the 2 feet gap and come closer to your colleague because it's the space in which you meet your colleague. However, try crossing the 2 feet zone, you come closer than that, you would find that people look very uncomfortable in your presence. Suppose you try to touch a person, especially of the other sex, you will find that people will be withdrawing from you. Why? Because you are invading their intimate zone. So spatial zones, spatial distance. Proxemics again is how far do you stand and how close do you sit or stand from someone. Now this is to do with cultures. There are warm cultures and cold cultures. In warm cultures, people tend to stand or sit closer to one another than in cold cultures, where we sit further from each other. Now they vary. Now in India, for instance, in Asian cultures, if you see businessmen talking to one another, you will see them huddled together. You will even find them whispering to one another. whereas that wouldn't be done in a European context or in an American context, because you're supposed to keep a certain distance. But you go to the Arab world, or you even see traditional Indian businessmen or traders talking to each other, you'll find they're mumbling something to one another, sotto voce. They are almost whispering something to one another, sitting very close. So these things are culturally conditioned. What is acceptable in one culture may not be acceptable in another culture. Then we come to gesture, how we can use gesture to communicate meaning. We can use clothing, what kind of attire you wear. Like don't you judge people on the basis of the way they are dressed? So suppose you have expectations of how a person should be dressed. So if you see a professor, you expect a professor or a banker to be dressed formally. But if you find an artist or a photographer or an advertising personnel, you don't, if they dress informally, you think this is expected of them. So with clothing, it's not a question of what is right way of clothing or wrong way of clothing, it's a question of what is appropriate. Architecture and objects. Architecture and objects are also very important. The way a room is arranged, furniture, the construction of a room itself, or the way objects are arranged in a particular space, they create a certain atmosphere. You would realize this when you go to your favorite restaurant. Why do you like going to a particular restaurant or not like going to another? Because a particular restaurant has an ambience. Suppose you go to Zen restaurant, it's got this very Japanese kind of ambience, it's all black and white, the decor, everything is silent. Whereas you go to another restaurant which has got an Indian theme, Zafran, you find that everything is traditional Indian, there's music, there's sitar music, the colors are warm and vibrant. So architecture and objects also can be used to communicate. Seating arrangement. Seating arrangement we think is inadvertent. You can place a chair anywhere, but you will find in business how carefully people arrange their seats so that they have the vantage point to observe others. In a meeting, for instance, they would arrange for their chairs to be placed higher than that of their listener, so that they have a dominant position. Time is another non-verbal element. Body language and paralanguage. So we will go into body language. Body language is the bodily gestures, postures and facial expressions by which a person communicates non-verbally with others. Body language and kinesics are based on the behavioral patterns of non-verbal communication, but kinesics is still so new as a science that its authorities can be counted on the fingers of one hand. So kinesics is a science of movement. Body language includes kinesics, and they are based on the behavioral patterns of communication. Body language includes all of these features: eye communication, facial expression, posture, movement, gesture, dress and appearance, voice and delivery, non-words, and finally paralanguage, which includes voice, pitch, volume, pace, pause, pronunciation, phonetics, stress, rhythm and intonation. So we will look at some forms of body language quickly to see how good you are at interpreting body language. So let's look at how the face can be used to communicate meaning. So let's look at this list. These are stereotyped associations which I have got from a standard textbook. If your forehead is wrinkled, it means anger. If your eyebrows outer edges are up, again it shows anger. Nose upward means contempt. So we have this typical proverbial British nose up in the air and the idea of being contemptuous or arrogant about others. Eyes, when you're looking at using eyes to communicate, when you're gazing up. So suppose I'm gazing up, I'm actually thinking. But if I'm gazing down, that means I'm ashamed. Gazing on the side, I'm guilty. Wandering, disinterested, bored. When you see in a classroom, eyes are wandering, they're looking from one thing, moving from one thing to another. That means they're not interested in what you're saying. Lips. When your lips are parted, it means you're relaxed or happy. When they're together, they're possibly concerned. When they're wide open, they're very happy, very angry. Arms. Arms crossed. If your arms are crossed, that means you're either angry or you're disapproving. When you're open, that means you're honest and you're accepting. Hands on top of head, amazement. Scratching head, puzzled, confused. Rubbing eyes, tired. Rubbing chin, thinking, timid, shy. Fingers interlocked, tense, pointing at you, angry. OK signal, it's fine, V sign, peace. And then we look at 3 kinds of body language which we use in business. First of all, we make a distinction between open body language and closed body language. Now, in general, as I said, due to our old ancient territorial instinct, we tend to build some defenses to protect our territory. And we use closed body language because we fear that someone is trying to attack us, someone is trying to invade our territory. So we tend to use closed body language. And when you use a closed body language, you come across either as defensive or as afraid, not as friendly. Whereas how you want to appear is friendly or someone who has nothing to conceal. So open body language is always preferable to closed body language in a professional situation because it shows that you have nothing to hide and you're not afraid, you're confident. Then it can be forward or backward. You can be leaning forward or you can be retreating backward. And then we have 4 categories: responsive, reflective, combative and fugitive. I'll quickly run through these before we close. Responsive body language. Engaged, leaning forward as in this picture. Open body, you see the arms, the hands and the feet both are open. Open arms, open hands, open body. This is a engaged body language, leaning forward. Responsive, another example of responsive is eager, where you in a sprinting position. Open legs, feet under chair, on toes, leaning forward. Another example of responsive, where you're ready to agree. You're closing the papers, pen is down and hand is flat on the table. So by reading these body language clearly, you would be able to master any situation where you are required to guess what the other person is thinking. It may be an interview, it may be a meeting, it may be a negotiation, it may be a new deal that you're making. If you're able to read the body language of others, because each conveys something, you will be able to structure or you rearrange or modify your own responses accordingly. Now we move to reflective language, listening, head tilted, lots of eye contact, nodding, high blink rate. Reflective, evaluating, sucks glasses, pencil, strokes chin, looks up and right, legs crossed in 4 poses, ankle on knee. So this is a reflective position and you would be familiar with it if you've made presentations before a professor or before a group of experts. You know, these are the signs which tell you that the person is thinking about what you're saying. Reflective can also have an attentive language where arms are behind back, you're smiling and your feet are open. Fugitive. Now this is a negative body language where you're bored. So what do? You stare into space, your posture is slumped, you're doodling, you're foot tapping. I'm familiar with this because I see my students doing when the lecture gets boring. They start doodling, they start staring, they start tapping their feet. Fugitive, let me go. When you want to run away, feet are towards the door, you're looking around, buttoning your jacket or picking up your bag. Fugitive, rejection, sitting and moving back. When you've decided, okay, this person has nothing to say that interests me, you sit back, move back. Your arms are folded behind your head. your legs are crossed, thighs on knee, and head is down, and you're frowning. That means you have rejected that person's idea. Finally, again, another example of a negative body language is a combative body language, where you're ready to get into a fight, into a combat, where you can't wait for, let me speak is one example, where you can't wait for the other person. You're not willing to listen to the other person. You're tapping your fingers, you're tapping your feet, you're staring. You're not allowing that person to speak because you want to get your word. Combative can also be an aggressive language. You're leaning forwards, your fingers are pointing, your fists are clenched. So that's a very aggressive, and when somebody is aggressive in a group, you can guess by looking at their body language. Defiant. Now, if a subordinate stands like this, usually people get irritated with the hands on hips, with a frown, because you expect them to be submissive. You expect them to have their hands folded behind them. And if they stand like this, you think, oh, this new recruit is very defiant because of the way the person is standing. So with this, we conclude the first unit of non-verbal communication and encoding meaning through non-verbal communication, in which we looked at the various kinds of what is non-verbal communication, metacommunication, the functions of non-verbal communication, and the kinds of non-verbal communication, and then we looked at the different forms of examples of non-verbal communication and appropriate non-verbal communication or inappropriate non-verbal communication when you're speaking or listening to another person. Thank you.